Applause continues after this opening concert, and Andrew Davis once again brings the BBC Symphony Orchestra and all our choristers to their feet. From me, James Naughtie, and everyone at a happy and warm Royal Albert Hall, good night.
And there's a private view of Mahler in the August issue of the BBC Music magazine. Well, the music of Mahler is featured in tonight's late film, Luchino Visconti's classic adaptation, Death in Venice, later at 12:30. In just over 5 minutes on BBC2, comedy from Monty Python. First, though, time for an added extra to this evening's lineup. George Melly with One Foot in the Park.
Every urban child has a park in his or her life. In my case, it was this one. I used to come here every afternoon with either my mother or my nanny to feed the ducks. And when I return to Liverpool, I still tend towards heading this way and walking here and there and looking at memories. The whole place is buttered with memories.
Through darkest clouds of grey, my heart will always find a way to love and happiness with you.
Sefton represented a Victorian park in its heyday. It was opened in 1872, a very public symbol of civic pride and built at a time of great prosperity. It was intended, like much else, to rival anything London could offer. It had its own Rotten Row, where posh children trotted past on hired ponies. It had its identical statues of Eros and Peter Pan, and even a pirate ship on the lake, the Jolly Roger. The whole design, however, was dominated by the Palm House, Liverpool's own Crystal Palace, centre of my childish world. I find it difficult to explain why it affects me so strongly after all these years, especially now after decades of financial neglect and decay. The building was boarded up for over 7 years. It was unsafe due to corrosion and vandalism. Now the council has found a little money and work's begun, but no one knows when or if they'll have the cash to finish it in time for the 100th anniversary, which is in 1996. To walk into the Palm House again, that's quite something. I've been able to do that for years. I've often stood and looked at it because it's a legendary building for me, mythical. It's changed a lot, of course. Here and there were very sentimental marble Victorian statues, usually of rather wistful young girls, but it was the contrast between the palms and the exotic plants, nature at its most extravagant, even absurd, contrasted with the rigidity of the architecture, the geometry, and then again elements of fantasy and decoration, all the little bits of Gothic ornamentation here and there, and the almost railway-like use of girders and so on, all these combined. And as a child, that was my general impression, that there was something of a fairy story, something poetic and magic about this building. When I was a teenager, I discovered the Surrealist movement and was enchanted by it. The belief that life was incomplete unless the conscious and the unconscious had equal sway. And when I discovered this philosophical position, I realized that ever since I'd been a child, I'd also been, albeit unknowingly, a Surrealist. And much later on, I realized, of course, that it was this building, above all others, that encouraged the embryonic Surrealist within me, not only for its own sake, but the fact that the men who had been wounded in the war and were housed at Queen Alexandra's Hospital nearby used this place exclusively. They wore bright blue suits and red ties, and of course they were missing one or more limbs. And in the winter, they sat inside, it was very hot here, and smoked their woodbines, and in the summer, on the benches outside, all identically dressed, none of them having the full complement of limbs. Well, that was meat for a Surrealist child. It certainly was. All around these buildings are empty plinths. When I was a child, they were occupied by statues in marble or bronze of great men connected with the arts and sciences. There was Mercator, who was a great navigator, holding a globe, and there was Linnaeus, who was a 16th century botanist holding a flower. My father, who liked to joke, persuaded me that Mercator was in fact Dixie Dean, the well-known footballer, and Linnaeus was the Prince of Wales, who he slightly resembled. And of course, I had no reason not to believe my father. The statues haven't actually got down off their plinths and walked away. They've long been removed by the council for protection against vandalism. They say that a statue on a plinth is not